Hello everyone, welcome to Raw Online. I'm Dr. Abhinaya, I'm a consultant pediatrician. So in the chapter discussion of pediatric critical care and emergencies, the topic of discussion now will be on hypernatremia. So hypernatremia, what are the topics that we are going to discuss under this hypernatremia? So the first will be how do you define hypernatremia? Then classification of hypernatremia based on the volume status, followed by causes of hypernatremia, clinical features, how are you going to approach, that means how are you going to diagnose, and then finally management. Okay, so we will go step by step. Before going on to the hypernatremia per se, few slides about the sodium metabolism. Okay, so sodium is quite unique because when we talk about hypernatremia or hyponatremia, it is not by the increase or decrease of sodium that the symptoms develop. It is only because of the water balance. Okay, so if it is hypernatremia, okay, there is a child who has sodium of 160, example. Okay, in that child, the volume status only will determine the clinical features. So the volume status can be hypervolemic. So much of 3% saline you are giving, so the volume status will be very high. Or if the child is having a episode of acute gastroenteritis where the child is losing so much of water, that is free water is lost. So there will be hypernatremia. So the water balance in the system only will determine the clinical features and manifestations of hypernatremia. Okay, you will get to understand this topic as and when we are discussing. Okay, I am just telling why sodium is unique here. Okay, so in the body, 40% of the sodium is present in the bone. Remaining is present in the interstitium and elsewhere. Sodium is the dominant cation of extracellular fluid. Majority of sodium is present only in the extracellular fluid, whereas potassium is mostly intracellular. So that is the contrast between sodium and potassium. Sodium is predominantly extracellular, whereas potassium is mostly intracellular. And the presence of sodium will determine the osmolality, isn't it? You know the formula for osmolality: 2 into sodium plus glucose by 18 plus urea by 2.8. 2 into sodium, say the sodium is 135. So 2 into sodium will be 270. What is our normal osmolality? It will be somewhere around 285 to 290 or 95, right? So among this 285 or 290, 270 will be sodium. So the principal determinant of osmolality is what ion? Sodium. Okay, so sodium is predominantly present in extracellular fluid and it is the principal determinant of your osmolality. So sodium rises, water will come along with it, sodium falls, then water also will get lost. Okay, so sodium will pull water wherever it goes. You can remember that, or just remember it is the principal determinant of extracellular osmolality. So predominantly you know it is extracellular, only 3% is intracellular. And why this extracellular and intracellular presence of sodium and potassium? It is because of the pump, which is your sodium potassium ATPase pump. This maintains the voltage gradient or the electrochemical gradient across the cell. And this is what I was explaining to you. Sodium is unique because the water balance inside the human body, inside our system, that will determine its concentration, not per se sodium alone. So the clinical feature will be dependent on how much water it is there. Okay, so that's why whenever we get children with hypernatremic dehydration, although they have dehydration, because of the hypernatremia, there will be no features. Okay, so it will be masked. The clinical features of dehydration like skin pinch, going very late, the sunken eyes, all these things will be masked. Okay, so now coming to the definition of hypernatremia. So serum sodium 135 to 145 is normal. Anything more than 145 we label it as hypernatremia. And here what happens in hypernatremia, water becomes less, sodium increases, or sodium is same, water alone decreases. So the ratio of water to sodium will come down. water sodium decreases. This is very important. Okay. When all can sodium rise in the blood? One is you give excess of sodium. Okay, so the salt ingestion, accidental salt ingestion or salt water drowning. So anything that will increase the intake or somehow salt enters into your system. Either orally it enters or you give 3% saline infusion, sodium will rise or the sodium is not getting excreted. Aldosterone, you know the hormone aldosterone, what it will do? It will increase the sodium reabsorption and it will cause the potassium to go out. So, like a state of hyperaldosteronism will increase the sodium in the system. So, just the basic points you remember, sodium when all it will rise in blood. Too much salt, when it is going through the mouth or it is coming through the kidney, like your aldosterone is acting on the distal tubules, it will increase the sodium reabsorption very much. That is one. Next, loss of water. Water is getting excreted out. What will happen? Sodium will be retained. Whenever free water alone is getting excreted, sodium will increase. Okay, so that's why this point, ratio of water to sodium, when it is decreased, there will be too much of salt. That is hypernatremia will be there. Where all water can go out? Three places where water can get excreted. One is through the mouth, GIT, so vomiting or diarrhea, or through your skin, or through the respiratory system, or through the renal, that is polyuria. Okay, so loss of water can happen here all. And finally, I told you the hypertonic saline, when you are giving infusions, that time also hypernatremia will result. So, one thing, what is the most important factor that will modify the volume status of the patient or the human body? Our water intake. If you have good thirst, so if I have hypernatremia, but if my thirst mechanism is intact, so I will have so much of water craving. So I drink so much of water. If my thirst mechanism is okay, if it is intact, this can be overcome. So number one or the most important factor which will modify the volume status of the body will be the water intake. But sometimes the thirst mechanism will not be intact. One is, extremes of age. In the newborns, they will not know to drink water, newborns or even infants for that matter, or in extremes of age like very, very old age. Or when there is primary adipsia, thirst mechanism is not intact, and any tumors like cellular tumors or supracellular tumors or in hypothalamic dysfunction, all these will be the causes where the thirst mechanism will not be functioning properly. Okay. Okay, so now coming to the causes of hypernatremia because of excess sodium, already we have discussed. One is you are giving hypertonic saline infusion. Another one, orally where all salt can go. If I take too much of salt in my diet, one. Another one for children, when the parents give very concentrated formula, they do not dilute it properly. So when they give a concentrated formula, that will result in hypernatremia. Third one, soda bicarb infusion. So sodium bicarbonate when you give as an alkali therapy for various disorders, that time also there will be hypernatremia. Okay, next, when there is aldosterone excess. So that's what I have discussed already. When there is aldosterone or mineralocorticoid excess, that will result in hypernatremia. Third one will be exogenously salt poisoning. Of course, it is impossible to eat salt more than 10 to 15 grams, right? Because it is not at all palatable. In case someone wants to deliberately take it, that will result in hypernatremia. Next will be drowning in seawater. Okay, so these are the causes of hypernatremia because excess sodium which is getting into the system. Next will be because of water loss, when the free water alone is getting lost, or sometimes water which is hypotonic or hypotonic fluid loss like diarrheal loss or vomiting loss. Even in the diarrheal fluid or in the vomiters, there is sodium, but that is hypotonic. Okay, it is not an isotonic fluid. It is not similar to our plasma. Okay, so because of the water loss or the fluid loss, there will be hypernatremia. Where all water can get lost? First is our kidneys. So kidneys, one is polyuria. So we know diabetes insipidus. So if the diabetes insipidus patient with no access to drinking water or they are not taking drinking water properly, that will lead to water loss. And next will be osmotic diuresis like glucose. So hyperglycemia is there, or when we give mannitol infusions. So all this will cause osmotic diuresis, polyuria. Whereas polyuria can be there in acute tubular necrosis, in an obstructive uropathy. So renal loss of water will happen whenever there is polyuria, right? Next, coming to the gut. So vomiting or diarrhea, or in NG feeds you have put NG and then there is excessive suctioning or excessive drainage from the NG. In that instance also there can be excessive water loss, right? Emesis, diarrhea or NG tube loss. Next, through the skin. Skin normally it will not get lost, but in conditions like when there is excessive sweating, in extremes of temperature, or infants, premature newborn babies kept under warmer, or burns patients. So in that instances there will be excessive skin loss of water. So we have seen we have seen the causes of hypernatremia under two headings. Okay, we will go slowly, right? So causes of hypernatremia, you know what is the definition of hypernatremia, right? Definition of hypernatremia you have written. Next, what happens to the sodium and water balance? So that you should know. And hypernatremia causes, you make two headings. One is because of salt excess in the body, there can be sodium hypernatremia, or because water is getting lost from the body, there can be hypernatremia. So this is the basic. From that you can write down below where all salt can become excess and how all water will get lost from the body. Okay, so these two headings you make, below that you make the examples. Done. So causes of hypernatremia is over. Okay, next we will proceed. So this is what I just told you. Even in diarrhea or vomiting, there is loss of fluid, not just fluid. Sodium is also getting lost. But look at the fluid which is lost, stool fluid loss. It is hypotonic. Only 35 or maximum only 65 milliequivalent of sodium will be present in 1 liter of the stool. So it is hypotonic than our serum or plasma, right? And look at the urinary loss, that is also hypotonic. So maximum of water will be lost. Whenever the water is getting lost from the body, sodium loss will be less. So resultant what will happen? Water is going out of the system, sodium is going little outside, the resultant will be hypernatremia. Okay, you might ask me, okay, sodium is also getting lost, why there is hypernatremia? That is the example, that is the reasoning behind it. Diarrhea or emesis or through your urine, sodium is also getting lost, but water, so much of water is going, very little salt is going. That's all. Okay, simply you can tell that, but you should know. Okay, so that what is the tonicity of stool fluid and your urinary loss, what will be the tonicity of that. So now coming to the classification of hypernatremia. Okay, so far we were telling the causes of hypernatremia, but to approach a case of hypernatremia, we should know the volume status of the child. So in hypernatremia, the child can be either hypervolemic, euvolemic or hypovolemic. Depending on the underlying pathology, the child's volume status will change. So our motto is to identify the child's volume status, and depending on that our management will be totally different for all these three types of hypernatremia. Okay, so yeah, euvolemic, hypovolemic and hypervolemic. But all types of hypernatremia will be hyperosmolar. Okay, so the clinical features that we get in hypernatremia will be secondary to the hyperosmolarity of the system. Okay, so coming to the types of hypernatremia, I'll go to this and then come back to that. Okay, so first, as I told you, hyper, hypo and eu. What is hypovolemic hypernatremia? Hypovolemic means what you know? Loss of water, isn't it? So volume is getting lost or water is getting lost. Where all water can get lost? Just now we discussed, isn't it? So where all water can get lost? Renal polyuria can be there, GI loss can be there, skin loss can be there. Very simple. Same I have written as a list again. Okay. So in skin, because of heat illness, burns, etc. And GI loss is because of diarrhea, vomiting, GI feeds or GI suction is there. Then renal is polyuria, like your DI with no access to water, osmotic diuresis, etc. So this is hypovolemic hypernatremia. This is not going to confuse you. Next come below, which is euvolemic hypernatremia. The prototype example for this will be our diabetes insipidus. You know diabetes insipidus is a euvolemic state. No edema will be there, isn't it? So, diabetes insipidus is the prototype of euvolemic hypernatremia. There will be polyuria, but the volume will be maintained. What else can mimic DI? Okay, so this is what I told you. And if the some of the neurogenic causes will be the examples for euvolemic hypernatremia. So, DI is also neurogenic cause, isn't it? So, one. Next, what is neurogenic cause? And any hypothalamic dysfunctions, supracellular tumors, drugs like amphotericin, phenytoin and aminoglycosides. You can remember this. Lithium also, if you want, you can remember. Okay. So, these are the causes of euvolemic hypernatremia. Here what happens, there is total body water will decrease, but the sodium level will be normal. Okay, so some amount of body water will be lost, but since the normal body sodium, it will try to regain that volume. So ultimately, the child's volume status will be normal. That is why euvolemic hypernatremia. Okay. Coming to hypervolemic hypernatremia. Hypervolemic means inside the system, the sodium also is increased, water is also increased. Hypervolemia means total body water will increase, hypernatremia, body sodium will increase. This is the typical example of our aldosterone excess, or when you give salt inside, like salt injections, seawater drowning, you give soda bicarb infusions, injections, or 3% saline infusions, or your primer hyperaldosteronism, all these things. Okay. So, this is hypervolemic hypernatremia. So, these are the examples. So, you have written, so you know what is the causes of hypernatremia already. And now, if you want to further classify based on the volume status also, you can do this. What is what is hypo and hypervolemic hypernatremia? Below that, you can write the examples. Now, let me just discuss this diagram over here. So, the figure over here will tell you, here, okay, this is a euvolemic state and normonatremia. So, sodium is normal, volume is normal. So, this is the water balanced and a salt balanced state. Okay. Now, come to hypervolemia and hypernatremia. Very simple, both will be excess. So, salt is excess, volume is also excess. Relative water deficit is there. When salt is excess, that much water will not be increased in the body. So, some amount of diuresis will definitely take place. That's why they have written as relative water deficit. I don't want to confuse here, but just look at the diagrams over here. Okay, both of these you can compare. You see here that the water has increased a little when compared to here, and salt excess is also there. Salt, so much of salt excess, but there will be relative water deficit. That's what they're trying to imply here. But ultimately, volume will be high, sodium level will be high. Hypervolemia, hypernatremia. Come to the other end here. Hypovolemia, hypernatremia. Look at the water. Look at the water here. The water, there is deficit. Definitely, there is loss. Look at the salt here. Salt also there is deficit, but it is not resulting in hyponatremia. What happens? So much of water is lost that whatever sodium is there inside the body will look like as though it is high. Okay. So, it might little bit confusing, but I am trying to make it simpler. When you go through the presentation again, it will be really clear. Okay. So, this is based on the volume status. One more we have left, isn't it? That is euvolemic hypernatremia. Here it is mostly polyuric, like diabetes insipidus is going to be your prototype. Just remember diabetes insipidus. Okay. And there so much of water is getting lost. So, free water loss is so much that the salt will become balanced. So, ultimately, the volume status is euvolemic. That's all. It's very simple. Free water loss is euvolemic hypernatremia. The other two will be hypovolemic hypernatremia. It is very simple for you. Hypervolemic hypernatremia is all your salt ingestion, salt infusions, aldosterone excess, etc. Okay. So, these are the types of hypernatremia. The management is going to be so different for all these three. So, our basic fundamental understanding of this is important. Okay. So, with this understanding, we will go to the further discussion. Clinical features, as I have told you, it is based on the etiology. Okay. So, if the patient has DI, he will come to you with polyuria, polydipsia, etc. If the patient has an acute gastroenteritis, nausea, vomiting, diarrhea will be there. So, the clinical features will be based on the underlying condition, But per se, because of hypernatremia, the child can be irritable, the child can throw a seizure, consciousness or some behavioral abnormalities can be there. That is dependent on the osmolarity, that is CNS osmolarity, right? So, irritability, lethargy, seizures, coma, depending on the degree of hypernatremia. Signs of dehydration will be must. Because of hypernatremia, you will not be able to feel for the skin turgor or the sunken eyes, etc. When you do the per abdomen palpation, you might get a doughy abdomen feel. Okay, when you feel for it, definitely you will know no dehydration. When you feel it, really feels so doughy. Okay, so when you get a child with hypernatremic dehydration, do that. You will never forget that feel. Okay. Next, moving on to the CNS symptoms. We just discussed what are the CNS symptoms of hypernatremia, but why do they occur? We will see. So, what happens normally when there is a cell here? When there is hypernatremia, what will happen is the cell size will start shrinking. All the water will move from the cell outside. So, when the water goes outside, the cells will start shrinking. So, the brain total volume will start shrinking. Look at the picture here. What will happen? It will go and put a force, shearing stress or force. So, it will create a stress of the bridging veins or the bridging vessels. So, sometimes even the rupture of the vessels will cause bleeding. Okay, so cells shrinkage will happen and that causes shearing and rupture of the CNS blood vessels. Also, hypernatremia, we know it is a hyperosmolar state. So, because it is a hyperosmolar state, it will increase the viscosity and it is a high risk for venous thrombosis. This is also very, very important. What happens if the patient has a chronic hypernatremia? Acute hypernatremia, the cells shrink, there is so much of, the cells will shrink and there is so much of irritability, lethargy, everything is happening. But what happens in a chronic hypernatremia? In chronic hypernatremia, the symptoms will not be that evident because of this reason. What happens is, this is the normal state. Okay, here it is a chronic hypernatremia state. So, now what happens is our body has tried to compensate so far to the hypernatremic state. What it will try to do is, my body knows that outside there is so much of sodium, this is my cell, and the cell, this will try to prevent the cell from shrinkage because I want my cell size to remain normal. How long can I cause cell shrinkage, isn't it? So, my body is trying to compensate. How? My body will try to produce what is called as an idiogenic osmoles. So, these are the idiogenic osmoles, these small green triangle ones. So, these idiogenic osmoles will sit inside the cell only. They will not go outside, will stay inside the cell and will prevent the cell from shrinkage. It will try to retain the cellular size. So, this is the function of idiogenic osmoles. So, these osmoles, osmoles will retain the water, it will not cross the membrane, and this is the function of idiogenic osmoles. Okay, so we have discussed about the symptoms now. Now, how are you going to approach a child? You have gotten a report, serum sodium 160. Okay, now the child is hypernatremic. Now, I should know first is the volume status of the child. Because only by knowing the volume status, my management is going to start. Without knowing nothing, I am not going to even touch the child. Okay. So, assess the volume status very, very importantly. How is the child? Euvolemic, hypervolemic or hypovolemic? Is there shock? Is there dehydration? Is there hypotension? Everything you should know. First, we will start with the management of hypovolemic. Okay, my child has had multiple episodes of acute gastroenteritis. My child has lost so much of water. Now, the child has landed up in hypernatremia and there is hypovolemia. So, all these things already we discussed. So, just we will move. Okay. So, there is polyuria, etc. There has been polyuria. Now, what is the urine output? That is also important because in acute gastroenteritis, finally the child will go for oliguria. So, in hypovolemic hypernatremia, the priority will be volume resuscitation. If there is shock, you are going to give bolus. If there is no shock, you are just going to give isotonic fluid. Isotonic is normal saline. Okay, normal saline or ringer lactate you are going to give as for resuscitation. Okay, start with normal saline. You are going to resuscitate with volume. First thing. Very, very importantly, do not give hypotonic fluids like N/2 or N/4 saline, thinking that I am going to reduce hypernatremia also now and I will give a hypotonic fluid. No. Now, for a hypovolemic hypernatremia, the priority is you are going to resuscitate by giving volume. When you give volume, proper volume resuscitation itself, you can see the sodium coming down wonderfully. Okay, so the first step in hypovolemic hypernatremia will be volume resuscitation. Please give isotonic fluid, saline, NS. And we are always, any type of hypernatremia, our aim is to correct the sodium very slowly. Slowly means 0.5 milliequivalents only I will reduce in 1 hour. That is the target. So, in 1 day I will reduce up to 10 to 12 milliequivalents maximum. So, if my sodium is already 170, in 1 day I cannot bring it to 145 and all. Okay, so we have to reduce only 12 milliequivalents per day. So, if how much high the sodium is, if it is 180, I will correct it over 3 days. If it is 170, it is over 2 days. So, 12 milliequivalents per day, depending on that you have to correct the sodium. And why slow correction? Because we have discussed about the cell shrinkage, no? If you are going to give fluid, what will happen? The fluid will go and enter the cells which have shrunken. So, the cells will readily absorb all the water. Now, it will start swelling up, especially in the brain. So, swelling up of the cells, what will happen? It will cause cerebral edema, raised ICP and herniation, seizures, all will happen. Okay, so slow correction has to be done. And in hypovolemic hypernatremia, say if the child is already losing also, so there is continuous vomiting is there, continuous diarrhea is there, we have to replace the ongoing losses also, and you have to continue your maintenance fluid. So, why slow correction? So, because this is just what I discussed now, whenever you give a rapid correction, the cells will start swelling up and that will cause cerebral edema and herniation because of raised ICP. So, first is in hypovolemic hypernatremia, if there is shock, give boluses, NS boluses, that is saline boluses, and correct the shock. Next, we have to give free water because excessive free water has been lost either through vomiting or through diarrhea. We have to give free water. How are we going to give free water? I will discuss in a moment. Then, solute fluid deficit. So, this step mostly in practical purpose we don't do, but to all the 5 steps, I am not going to explain step 3 over here because even without this intensive care practice also we follow. So, to say all these steps you can refer to Harriet Lane, but I will explain what to do for hypovolemic hypernatremia, that is more than enough even for practical purpose and for examinations here. Okay. And step 4 will be maintenance. I have corrected my shock, I have started giving free water, then I am going to give maintenance fluid and whatever losses is there I am going to do it. Okay. So, one thing is shock correction, that I am not going to tell, you do that. Next will be same thing. Okay. So, yeah, all this, the treatment of hypernatremia principles what I told you. We have to come down to 145, whatever be the sodium, but we have to aim at the fall of only 12 milliequivalent in 1 day, not more than that. Okay, so that is what I told you. And every 4 hours, please check the sodium levels. Yes, very, very important point. So, when you are treating hypernatremia, suddenly if the patient is throwing a seizure, invariably please stop the correction and give 3% saline. It means you have corrected rapidly and now there is cerebral edema and the patient has started throwing a seizure. So, practical point, you start 3% saline bolus, send the electrolyte again and then take a call. Okay. So, okay. So, shock correction we have done. Next is step 2. What is step 2? Free water deficit. Free water, first was what is free water? Free water means water which is free from sodium. Is NS free from sodium? No. N/2 saline free from sodium? No. Is dextrose solution 10% dextrose free from sodium? Yes. Any solution which is free from sodium is going to be your free water. That's all. Okay. And how do you calculate free water deficit? One is you can calculate through the Androg-Medeiros equation. Clinically, we use a very simple formula, 4 ml per kg into the sodium level more than 145. Okay. So 4 into whatever weight of the baby into sodium more than 145 means if it is 160 then into 15, if it is 170 into 25. So that is the formula that we use practically, and more or less when you use 4 ml per kg formula and androgemidase, more or less you will get the same amount, okay, same quantity. So we use this because it is more easier. And yeah, so which is free water here? NS, it does not contain free water at all, so it contains 0 ml of free water. What about half DNS? It contains around 50 ml of free water because the NS will be half, normal saline will be N by 2 over here. And dextrose or distilled water will contain 100 ml of free water. So how are we going to give this free water? Either orally or through NG tube. And if the patient is critically ill, IV correction is also given. But when we are giving, give a very hypotonic fluid like a N by 3, N by 4 or even N by 5 saline, the more hypotonic it is, the more slower we need to administer, and frequent checking of sodium levels has to be done. Please remember that. So we have completed our hypovolemic hypernatremia. Next we will move on to hypervolemic hypernatremia. So hypervolemic hypernatremia is salt excess, water excess. So both are excess. Now we want to remove them. What we can do, it is like an edematous state. What we can do, we will start a loop diuretic, and the replacement fluid only with dextrose is enough for this patient. So once you start diuretic and 10% dextrose, that is enough. You can keep monitoring the sodium level. And sodium from any medicines, from any oral or IV fluid has to be removed. If it is refractory, that is hypernatremia more than 180, some value like that, then we have to take a call and consult the nephrologist for hemodialysis. What about euvolemic hypernatremia? Euvolemic hypernatremia, what is the prototype example? Example is DI, diabetes insipidus, right? So what you do in euvolemic hypernatremia is, first, what is the cause we have to identify. Sometimes it can be tumors or hypothalamic dysfunction, cellular or supracellular tumor. So if it is a neurological one, get a neurosurgeon's opinion. Okay, and start treating the underlying cause. For DI, look if it is a central DI or a nephrogenic DI. Okay, and in euvolemic hypernatremia, what happens is, if the patient is dehydrated, then you can give fluid resuscitation or you start with a maintenance fluid. Here the replacement of the losses, whatever loss, wherever the loss is there, here only polyuria is there, no DI. So you replace the urinary losses every 4 hourly or every 6 hourly, depending on the urinary sodium. Urinary sodium, of course, you can measure from the lab. Also, you know that urinary sodium will approximately be 50-60 milliequivalents per liter. So, depending on the urinary sodium, you will choose the fluid. What kind of fluid you should do? N by 2 or N by 3 or N by 5 saline. So, how is the sodium in the urine? Depending on that, choose a fluid, and that you can start substituting every 4 hourly or every 6 hourly. In euvolemic hypernatremia, the fluid that we select is usually N by 3 or N by 4 saline. And maintenance fluid we increase. So this will be our maintenance fluid, N by 3 or N by 4 saline, and you keep the maintenance fluid, you increase the maintenance fluid as 1.5 times the normal. So when you start doing this maintenance fluid 1.5 times the normal what is required for that patient, and you continue this, you serially keep checking the sodium levels will drop. This is enough for euvolemic hypernatremia, and whatever losses is present, that you are going to replace. If there is a need for resuscitation, you are going to replace the fluid resuscitation. And of course, if there is DI, the treatment of central DI or nephrogenic DI should happen accordingly. And you can also start vasopressin infusion, but at a very, very minimal dose, like 0.0005, which is very, very less than the vasopressor dose that we give for shock. No, so in this dosage we can start as a infusion also, and our aim is to bring the urine output too low. There will be polyuria in DI, so we titrate and bring the urine output to at least 3 to 4 ml per kg per hour. Nephrogenic diabetes insipidus treatment, we have already discussed a separate presentation on diabetes insipidus. Okay. So far we have talked about hypovolemic hypernatremia, hypervolemic and euvolemic hypernatremia. Hypovolemic is those 5 steps. If you want to go through the complete 5 steps, refer to Harriet Lane. And apart from that, the volume resuscitation, how to give free water, how to calculate the free water, and replacement of ongoing losses. If you do all those things, that is more than enough practically also. That is for hypovolemic hypernatremia. Euvolemic hypernatremia, classical example of DI, you are just going to give a hypotonic solution 1.2 to 1.5 times, maintenance fluid, and then replace the ongoing losses. Treatment of the underlying cause. If DI, then you treat vasopressin infusions can be started. That is enough for euvolemic hypernatremia. Hypervolemic hypernatremia, diuretic and fluid. Okay, so that is enough. Now, finally, you have tried all the measures. If the serum sodium is continuously more than 180, then we can do hemodialysis. Okay, next. When there is features of fluid overload which is not responding to your diuretics, oral diuretic, then you have started IV or IV diuretic infusion, it is not responding, then we can go for hemodialysis. If there is accompanied renal insufficiency, of course, we have to go for hemodialysis, and a severe metabolic acidosis also, hemodialysis is the answer. Okay, so with that we come to the end of this discussion on hypernatremia. So please go through this again. I have given it in a simplified manner. I purposefully have avoided talking about solute fluid, sodium deficit, etc. over here, because whatever we do practically has been covered here. If you have further doubts, you can read your textbooks and some of the recent guidelines also. This will be very much useful practically and for your exams. Thank you so much everyone for your patient listening.